In 2016, a Stars and Stripes flag that flew on a landing craft during the D-Day invasion sold at auction for $514,000. It had spent decades folded away in a drawer before anyone realized what it actually was. Most people look at an old box of Granddad's war stuff and check one thing. Does it look old enough? Does it look military enough? Is it obviously damaged? Then it goes in the bin. That's exactly backwards. The difference between landfill and a life-changing sale isn't how the item looks. It's whether anyone actually checked what it was before throwing it out. Tell us what's sitting in your garage right now. Here are 10 World War II items that have genuinely been sold for real money, starting with the one almost everyone already owns without knowing it: Zippo lighters. Millions of GIS carried these, so on their own, most are worth very little, a few dollars at best. And that's the trap. Nobody expects a lighter to be worth anything, so they're the first thing thrown in a junk drawer without a second look. But engraved examples, especially ones marked with a unit, a battle, or a personal inscription scratched in by hand at the front, are a completely different story. A plain windproof black Crackle Zippo has sold for $350 at auction, and personalized examples with genuine wartime engraving go well beyond that. What collectors check? An engraving that's clearly period correct rather than added decades later. The original windproof black crackle finish, and a hinge and flint wheel that still function. Even the manufacturing date stamped into the base plate matters. Wartime models used specific metal alloys due to brass shortages, and collectors can date one to within a year or two from that detail alone. Typical value: $50 to $350 for a standard example, considerably more for anything personally engraved with a name, unit, or date that can be researched and verified. Now, something built to survive a battlefield, not sit on a shelf. Vintage military radios. Field radios and transceivers used by Signal Corps units represent a real collector category, and completeness matters enormously. A radio without its original case, headset, and hand microphone is a fraction of the same set found whole. The BC-611 handy-talkie, carried ashore in the first wave at Omaha Beach on D-Day, is one of the most recognizable examples, a genuine piece of World War II communications history that fits in one hand. What collectors check? Matching serial numbers across the radio and its accessories, an intact original carrying case, and original paint and stenciling rather than a repaint that erases unit markings. Resist the urge to plug one in and see if it still works. Internal components this old can fail in ways that damage the set permanently, and a collector would rather buy an untested original than one powered on without the right equipment. Typical value: $570 to $2,750 based on real confirmed auction sales. Now, something you'd actually want to wear, not just display. Airborne paratrooper uniforms. There's a real romance attached to elite units that drives collector demand hard. A genuine jump jacket can sell for $1,500 to $2,000. And jump pants for $2,000 to $2,500, with gear tied to the 101st or 82nd Airborne commanding even more. What collectors check? Correct unit patches sewn on rather than pinned for display, original jump wings rather than reproductions, and label tags matching the correct wartime manufacturer. Reinforced knees, reinforced ammunition pockets, and tightened cuffs designed to stop equipment snagging on the way out of an aircraft door are all genuine period features. A civilian reproduction rarely gets all right at once. On to something built for one very specific, very deadly job: sniper scopes. Optics like the USMC Unertl 8 Power, one of roughly 2,800 made in 1940 specifically for Marine Corps sharpshooters, sit at a genuine crossover between militaria and precision optics collecting, a small documented production number for a highly specialized wartime tool. What collectors check? Matching serial numbers between the scope and its mounting rings, original blue finish with minimal wear, and correct period mounting hardware rather than a modern reproduction bracket. Early production examples, generally in the lowest serial ranges, are notably harder to find than later ones and command a real premium. Typical value: $2,500 to $5,000 for a standard example in good condition, with early or exceptional examples reaching $5,000 to $7,000. Now into something with real signature value. Autographed photos of wartime generals. Signed photographs of Eisenhower, Patton, or MacArthur regularly sell for thousands of dollars apiece, with a genuine Patton autograph reaching as high as $10,000. These photographs were often signed in bulk for troops, war bond drives, or press requests, which means the image itself is rarely unique. It's the ink on top of it that carries all the value. That distinction matters enormously, because it also means this category is an easy one to fake convincingly with a printed signature or a stamp that only close inspection reveals. What collectors check? The autograph compared against verified exemplars, and any accompanying letter or family story establishing how it was acquired. A signature obtained in person with a witness date will always outvalue an identical-looking one with no story behind it. The paperwork is what a serious collector is actually paying for. Harley-Davidson WLA military motorcycles. Around 90,000 were built for the U.S. Army, and thousands were sold off cheap as surplus afterward, meaning a genuine example may have sat forgotten under a tarp for 80 years. A correctly restored 1944 WLA sold for £16,100, roughly $20,000, at a real Bonhams auction in 2025. What collectors check? Matching frame and engine numbers, correct military spec parts rather than later civilian replacements, and surviving original paperwork. Even a heavily modified WLA can be worth restoring correctly, since original components turn up often enough that a patient rebuild is a realistic path for collectors. Now, personal items connected to a famous name. Personal effects tied to named commanders. An object's value can multiply enormously once linked to a documented historical figure. General Patton's own swagger stick sold for $64,625 at a real 2024 auction. Not because it's rare as an object, but because of exactly whose hand held it. Patton was known for carrying his personal effects with the same deliberate showmanship he brought to the battlefield, which is exactly why items connected to him specifically command such outsized attention compared to similar gear tied to less famous officers. It's a useful reminder that this entire category isn't really about militaria at all. It's closer to celebrity memorabilia that happens to have a wartime setting. What collectors check? Documented provenance tracing the item directly to the named individual, since this is also the category most heavily targeted by fakes. Enigma machines. A genuine 3-rotor Enigma machine set a world record, selling for $499,475 in December 2025. These occupy an unusual place in militaria collecting, celebrated because they represent a failure, the code-breaking triumph that helped defeat the regime that built them. What collectors check? A complete rotor set, an intact keyboard and lamp board, and the original wooden transport case. These machines were built in the tens of thousands, yet most were deliberately destroyed at war's end. Exactly why a genuinely complete surviving example is such a significant discovery. Genuine D-Day invasion flags. The flag we opened with sold for $514,000. A separate D-Day landing flag reached $500,000 and was later donated to a national collection. Both flags share the same underlying story, an ordinary piece of military-issue fabric that happened to be present at one of the single most documented moments in modern history, which is exactly what turns something replaceable into something that can never be recreated. Unlike most items on this list, flags like these tend to surface not from addicts, but from the descendants of the sailors and soldiers, who quietly kept them as a personal souvenir long before anyone thought to ask what they might be worth. What collectors check? Documented unit history, physical evidence consistent with genuine combat use, and a clear chain of ownership running back to the war itself. Military Leica cameras, Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe. Leica supplied cameras directly to the German military throughout the war, and today these sit at the absolute top of camera collecting. Not militaria collecting, camera collecting, full stop. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance Leica fitted with an early motor drive sold for $967,410 in 2023. setting a world record for the model. The actual camera used to photograph the famous raising a flag over the Reichstag image carries an estimate of 230,000 pounds to 340,000 pounds. Even a standard issue Wehrmacht or Luftwaffe Leica 3C with nothing more than genuine period engravings is described by specialists as exceptionally rare and highly sought after. This is not a category where ordinary means cheap. Here's the catch: this is also one of the most heavily faked categories in the entire hobby. Since the 1990s, a cottage industry has existed, mostly out of Russia, taking cheap Soviet-era Zorky and Fed cameras and engraving them with forged Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine markings to fool unsuspecting sellers and buyers alike. What collectors check? A serial number that matches Leica's own meticulous production and shipping records, since the company documented exactly which cameras went to the military and when. Genuine period markings, things like KB or KBA for war correspondent units, were typically scratched and crudely by hand at the time, not engraved cleanly, which is oddly one of the signs of authenticity rather than a red flag. And critically, get anything like this verified by a genuine Leica specialist archive before you believe what's engraved on the back. If you're still with us, hit subscribe. This is exactly the kind of history I go looking for in old boxes and garage clearouts every week, and I'd rather teach you to recognize it than see it thrown away. What nobody tells you before you sell. The biggest mistake is cleaning or restoring anything before it's been properly identified. A repainted motorcycle or a re-inked signature can destroy exactly the originality a collector is paying for. Keep every item with its original case, tags, or paperwork, since completeness consistently multiplies value far more than condition alone. Photograph everything. Check real completed sales rather than asking prices, and get a genuine appraisal before accepting a quick offer. Then, tell us what you found.